Hello students, welcome back to the EMSAT Achieve Biology lecture series. In the last lecture, we were discussing this section and this subsection about biochemistry. We talked about cellular respiration, the aerobic respiration, the aerobic part of it. Today, we'll be discussing the anaerobic respiration, which is falling under cellular respiration as well. So we straight away start off with something which is called fermentation. Remember, what did I say in the last lecture? Glucose breaks into pyruvate by the process of glycolysis. If oxygen is available, they will go for Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. They will move to the mitochondria for that. But if oxygen is not available, then they will stay in the cytoplasm and they will carry out something called fermentation, which can either be lactic acid fermentation or alcohol fermentation, depending on the organism and depending on the conditions. So fermentation is, as you know, a type of anaerobic respiration. That means it takes place in the absence of oxygen. Okay, so fermentation is making ATP for you. We know that both the aerobic respiration and aerobic respiration makes ATP for you, but aerobic respiration makes around 36 molecules of ATP for you, whereas anaerobic just make 2 ATP molecules for you. Okay, so just like glycolysis, fermentation takes place in the cytoplasm. So now what happens in fermentation is, now in glycolysis, as you must be aware, we did glycolysis in the previous lecture, we are making use of something called NAD plus to make NADH, right? We need NAD plus for glycolysis to continue. But who gives us this NAD plus? We need it. We need a continuous supply for it. So glycolysis will stop if NAD plus is not there in the cell. So it's the fermentation which allows the NAD plus to be recycled back for the glycolysis to continue forever. Okay, so the NAD plus allows glycolysis to continue making ATP. If there is no fermentation, there is no NAD plus, and there will be no glycolysis and no aerobic respiration as well, because glycolysis is the common point. Remember that. So there are two types of fermentation: lactic acid fermentation and alcohol fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation, remember, from glycolysis, from 1 molecule of glucose, we get 2 molecules of pyruvate. There's no oxygen, this pyruvate, 2 molecules of pyruvate, with the help of something called NADH, it will make NAD plus. This is why I said it's recycled back. That's one of the purpose of fermentation. And you make 2 molecules of lactic acid. So in which organism do we find them? We find them in the bacteria which is present in yogurt, which is the bacteria which makes the curd or yogurt for you. And then you also see it in humans, in the muscle cells. Sometimes if you do too much of exercise, you find some pain in your muscles. And why do you feel that pain? This is because of the buildup or accumulation of lactic acid in your muscles. Okay. So lactic acid fermentation produces 2 key products, which is your lactic acid and NAD plus, which is important for glycolysis to continue. We know that. Okay. Next is alcohol fermentation. Here the pyruvate doesn't make lactic acid. Instead, it makes something called ethanol. So from 2 molecules of pyruvate, we take 2 molecules NADH to make 2 molecules of NAD plus, which will go and allow your glycolysis to continue, as we know, plus 2 molecules of carbon dioxide, which we do not make in the lactic acid fermentation. It's only here in alcohol fermentation that you make carbon dioxide. And finally, 2 molecules of ethanol. So where does this type of fermentation takes place? This type of fermentation takes place in plants, in yeast, and in some bacteria. Okay. So this is gist of both the fermentation processes. Again, in lactic acid, let's compare them. We start with 6 molecules of glucose in both the cases. Glycolysis will make 2 molecules of pyruvate, which is a common process. And finally, the net gain will be 2 ATP, as we said. Then, in case of lactic acid fermentation, The pyruvate will make just lactic acid, 2 molecules, plus, we know NAD plus, right? 2 molecules of NAD plus. Here in alcoholic fermentation, the pyruvate will make ethanol, will make NAD plus just like this, but here we also make 2 molecules of carbon dioxide, which we don't see in lactic acid fermentation, which is a very important key point. This sums up your aerobic and anaerobic respiration, which is part of your cellular respiration. Next lecture we will talk about photosynthesis, but before that, let's practice some important EMSAT questions which is based on this topic. Look at this question. Which of the following is correct about Krebs cycle? No energy carrying molecules are produced. Do you think nothing, no energy molecule? No, we do produce ATP, right? In Krebs cycle, we know that. Not functioning in the absence of oxygen, we'll get back to this later, occurs in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Where does the Krebs cycle take place? Not in the inner membrane. In the inner membrane, the electron transport chain takes place. Where does Krebs cycle take place? In the mitochondrial matrix, right? And then produces the highest amount of energy among all stages of cellular respiration. Yes, it does produces a lot of ADPs, right? And now let's get back to option number B. Not functioning in the absence of oxygen. Of course, because Krebs cycle is a part of aerobic respiration. If there is no oxygen, means it will not function. It will only function if you have oxygen present. So your answer would be answer number B. Again, the next question. The burning sensation that you feel during intense exercise is caused by the accumulation of which substance in the muscles? We talk about it in the alcoholic fermentation, or which one? The lactic acid fermentation? Where did we talk about this one? We talked about this in the lactic acid fermentation, right? Just said, if you do too much of exercise, you feel pain or burning sensation. This is because of the buildup of lactic acid or lactate in your muscles. Okay, so the answer would be either lactic acid or lactate. And then the next question. The energy related process that leads to the production of ethyl alcohol or lactic acid, what are the types? They are types of fermentation, right? And then which elements acts as the last electron acceptor during aerobic respiration? They're talking about the electron transport chain. Who is the terminal electron acceptor, the last electron acceptor? Just discuss that. It's oxygen. So your options, the answers are fermentation and oxygen. That's all for this lecture. And in the next lecture, we'll be discussing details of photosynthesis, which is also very important for your exam. Thank you so much for listening.